Dance with me like we used to," she whispered, and I put my hand on her back the way I had 100 times a lifetime ago, and that's when I felt it. The tremor she was trying to hide. The careful, borrowed way she held herself upright. 10 years I'd spent believing this woman left me because she stopped loving me. And it took exactly one dance to understand I'd had the story backward the whole time. Let me back up, because a moment like that doesn't mean anything until you know what the 10 years before it cost me. I'm Sam Riez. I'm 41, and I build furniture for a living in a workshop behind my house in a small town in the Hudson Valley, a couple hours north of the city. Chairs, tables, the occasional cradle for somebody's first grandchild. It's quiet work, and it suits me, because somewhere along the way I turned into a quiet man. I wasn't always. There was a version of me a long time ago who could clear a dance floor, who'd grab a woman's hand at a party and spin her until people stopped their own conversations to watch. That man doesn't exist anymore. He walked out of a rented apartment on a Tuesday in October 10 years ago and never fully came back, and the woman who dissolved him was named Grace Callahan. Grace and I met dancing. That's the thing you have to understand first, because it's the whole language of us, and it's why the moment on that dance floor a decade later hit me the way it did. We were both 29. It was a friend's engagement party at some hall, with a bad DJ and a good floor, and I saw her from across the room, dark hair, a red dress, a way of standing like she was already halfway into a song only she could hear, and I did the boldest thing I've ever done in my life, which was walk straight across that room and hold out my hand and say, "You look like you know how to dance." And she looked me up and down and said, "I look like a lot of things. Prove you can keep up." I couldn't entirely, she was better than me. But I kept up well enough that we danced every song, and then we danced in the parking lot with no music at all because neither of us wanted the night to end. And that was that. My whole life reorganized itself around a woman in a red dress in a single evening. We were together 3 years, and they were the best years I had, and I'll say that plainly because there's no point telling this story if I'm going to be careful about it. Grace was quick and warm and a little guarded in a way that took me a long time to understand. She worked as a physical therapist, which matters, hold on to that, and she was the kind of person who paid attention. Really paid attention. She'd notice you were favoring your left knee before you did. She'd catch the thing you almost said and didn't. She loved to dance the way some people love to breathe, and dancing with Grace was the closest I've ever come to feeling like two people could actually become one thing, moving together without either one leading, just moving. We used to do this slow step in the kitchen, no music, just her hand in mine and my other hand flat on her back and her forehead against my jaw, turning in these slow, small circles on the linoleum while dinner burned. That was ours. That step. I want you to hold on to that too. I was going to marry her. I had the ring. I'd been carrying it around for 3 weeks, looking for the right moment. And I'd settled on our anniversary, which was coming up, and I had this whole thing planned, and I never got to do any of it. Because that October, Grace left. It wasn't a fight. That's the part that made it impossible to set down for 10 years. There was no blow-up, no other person, no slammed door. She just got quiet. For about 2 weeks, she got quieter and quieter. This distance opening up in her that I couldn't find the edges of, and every time I asked what was wrong, she said nothing was wrong. She was just tired, work was hard, and I believed her because I wanted to. And then one Tuesday I came home from the shop and she was sitting at the kitchen table, our table, the one we danced next to with her bags already packed by the door. And she told me she was leaving, that she'd taken a job in another state, that she cared about me, she'd always care about me, but she couldn't do this anymore and she needed me to let her go without a fight. And please don't make it harder than it has to be. I asked her why. I asked her 100 ways, and all she'd give me was that it wasn't me. It was her, that someday I might understand, but she couldn't explain it now, and that the kindest thing I could do was not chase her. And then she picked up her bags and she left, and I stood in that kitchen next to the table where we used to dance, and I did not chase her, because she asked me not to. And that turned out to be the great regret of my life, that I loved her enough to obey the one request I should have ignored. She was gone, within the week. New number, new state, gone. I told myself a story to survive it, and the story was this. She left because she stopped loving me. Because when it came right down to it, when the ring and the marriage and the whole rest of a life were sitting right there in front of her, she looked at me and found me lacking, and she was too kind to say so to my face. That was the story. It's a cruel one, and I built my next 10 years on top of it like it was bedrock, and it did to me what a story like that does to a man. I stopped dancing completely, not one step in 10 years. I moved north, bought the little house, built the workshop, and made myself small and useful and quiet. I dated a little, here and there, nothing that took. There was a woman named Dana I saw for almost a year, kind and patient, and she ended it gently and said the truest thing anyone said to me in that whole decade. You're a good man, Sam, but you keep a room locked, and I'm tired of standing outside a door you won't open. She was right. I had a locked room, and Grace Callahan had the only key, and she'd taken it to another state 10 years ago. So, the wedding. It was my cousin Marcus's wedding, and I almost didn't go, because I'm the guy who leaves before the dancing now, and a wedding is 4 hours of watching other people have the thing you gave up on. But Marcus is family, and family shows up, so I put on the suit and I drove down to a restored barn in the countryside with string lights in the rafters. And I told myself I'd stay through dinner and slip out before the floor opened up. I was standing near the bar doing exactly that arithmetic when I saw her. Grace, across the room. 10 years older, and I knew her instantly, the way you know a song from the first note, the dark hair with some gray in it now, the way she stood. But something was different, and it took me a second to place it. She was thinner, and she stood carefully. That's the only word for it. Where Grace used to stand like she was already halfway into a song, now she stood like she was concentrating on standing, one hand resting light on the back of a chair like she wanted it there just in case. My whole body went cold and hot at once. I hadn't seen this woman in a decade, and I'd rehearsed this moment 10,000 times, in 10,000 different moods, the cold version, the cruel version, the mature I'm so over it version, and now that it was real. Every single one of them evaporated and left me standing at a bar feeling 29 years old and gutted. She saw me. I watched her see me, and I braced for her to do the polite thing, the little wave, the oh my goodness, Sam, how are you? The careful small talk of two people who used to be everything and are now nothing. That's not what she did. She looked at me for a long moment across that barn, and something moved across her face that I couldn't read, and then she started walking toward me. Slowly, carefully, and she came right up close, closer than strangers stand, close the way we used to stand, and she looked up at me and she said the 4 words that unmade me. Dance with me like we used to. I should have said no. Every sensible thing in me knew that a man who spent 10 years surviving a heartbreak does not walk out onto a dance floor with the woman who caused it. But I have never in my life been able to say no to Grace Callahan. And apparently 10 years hadn't fixed that, so I set down my drink and I took her hand, and her hand was different. That was the first thing. There was a fine tremor in it, a small, constant shake she was working to control. I looked at her. She didn't look away. The DJ, or fate, or my cousin's questionable playlist, put on something slow, and I put my right hand on her back, flat, the way I'd done 100 times a lifetime ago, and I felt the whole truth of her in that one point of contact. The careful, effortful way she held herself upright, like standing straight, was a thing she had to decide to do rather than a thing her body just did. The tremor running through her whole frame now, not just her hands. And when I started, gently, to move us into that slow step, our step, the kitchen step, the small circles, I felt her try to follow it, and I felt her body not be able to. Not fully. The turn that used to be water was effortful now. Her feet didn't quite trust the floor. She was dancing from memory, her body reaching for something it used to do easily and coming up just short, and covering the gap with will. And I understood. Standing there on that dance floor with my hand on her back, 10 years of a cruel story I'd built my whole life on came apart in a single held breath. Because a physical therapist who left a man she was about to marry, who got quiet and careful and gave him a reason that wasn't a reason, who moved away so he wouldn't chase her, a woman whose body, 10 years later, shook and reached for steps it could no longer quite make. That woman hadn't left because she stopped loving me. Grace, I said. My voice didn't work right. What is this? She kept her forehead near my jaw, the way she used to, so she wouldn't have to look at me while she said it. Keep dancing, she whispered. Please, just keep dancing with me, and I'll tell you. I've owed you this for 10 years, and I can only do it if we're moving. So we kept moving, slow and careful, and she told me. She'd started noticing things that last autumn we were together. Little things. A tremor in her hand that she blamed on too much coffee. A stiffness. A morning her leg didn't quite do what she asked it to. And she was a physical therapist. She knew bodies. She knew what those small early signs could mean, and she was terrified. And she went and got tested, and she got the diagnosis 2 weeks before she left me. Early onset. A progressive neurological disease, the kind with a name that lands like a door closing, the kind that was going to slowly take her body's cooperation away from her over years, and there was no fixing it, only slowing it, only managing it. I was 32, she whispered, moving with me, and I sat in that doctor's office and all I could think about was you. About the ring I knew you were carrying, Sam. I found it. Weeks before. I wasn't snooping. It fell out of your jacket, and I put it back, and never said anything. I knew you were going to ask me. And I sat in that office and I thought about you spending the next 20 or 30 years watching me lose the ability to walk, to dance, to feed myself, to everything. I thought about the dancing most of all. About how the thing we were, the way we loved each other, was in our bodies. It was in moving together, and I was going to lose my body a piece at a time. And I could not, Sam, I could not stand the thought of you slowly turning into my nurse, of watching the way you looked at me change from that, from the way you looked at me across that engagement party, into something careful and sad and dutiful. I couldn't do it. I loved you too much to make you watch it. The barn, the lights, the other dancers, all of it went away. There was just her hand shaking in mine and her voice against my jaw. So I decided for you, she said. I know that's what I did. I've had 10 years to understand exactly what I did. I looked at your whole life and I decided you'd be better off free than tied to a woman who was going to become a burden. And I never once asked you what you wanted. Because I was so afraid that you'd say you wanted to stay, that you'd give up everything to take care of me. And I'd have let you, because I was weak. And I loved you, and I'd have said yes, and watched you shrink your whole life down around my illness. So I didn't give you the chance. I got quiet, and I packed my bags, and I made up a reason that wasn't a reason, and I asked you not to chase me, because I knew if you chased me even a little I'd fall apart and tell you the truth. And you didn't chase me, and I hated you for it for about a year. She let out a broken sound that was almost a laugh, which isn't fair because I engineered it, but I did. I stood at a bus window and hated you for doing exactly what I begged you to do. I had to stop moving. I couldn't dance and hold what she was handing me at the same time. I stood there in the middle of the floor with both her shaking hands in mine, and I said the only thing that was true. You should have told me. I know. No, Grace. You don't understand. You should have told me. That was mine to decide. You took the biggest choice of my life and you made it for me alone in a doctor's office, and you never even I had to stop. 10 years. I spent 10 years believing you looked at me and found me lacking. I built my whole life on the idea that I'm a man who's easy to leave. And the whole time the truth was the exact opposite. You left because you loved me. And you let me carry that other story for 10 years because you decided I couldn't handle the real one. She was crying now, silently, the tears just running. I know, Sam. I'm not here to tell you I did the right thing. I did a loving thing and a cowardly thing, and they were the same thing. And I've known it for years. I'm here because she stopped and gathered herself. And this is the part that finished me. I'm here because it's slower than they thought. That's the thing about the timeline nobody tells you. I planned my whole life, I planned your whole life, around a disease that was supposed to move faster than it did. It's been 10 years and I'm still here. I'm still walking. I can still mostly dance. if somebody holds me up. And a year ago, I finally understood that I threw away the best thing I ever had to spare you a future that hasn't even fully arrived yet, that I gave up 10 years we could have had. Real years. Good years. Because I was so busy protecting you from the bad ones that I forgot the bad ones weren't even here yet. Her voice broke completely. I robbed us both of a decade, Sam, to protect you from something that's still, 10 years later, mostly just a tremor and a bad day here and there. And I will regret that until the day my body finally does quit on me. I want to tell you I had something wise to say. I didn't. What I did was pull Grace Callahan against my chest in the middle of my cousin's wedding and hold her while she shook from the disease and from the crying both, and I couldn't have told you where one ended and the other began, and I put my mouth against her hair, and I said, "Then, let's not waste any more of them." She pulled back and looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Sam, did you hear what I heard all of it? I'm going to get worse. That's not a maybe. The tremor gets worse. The walking gets worse. Eventually, all I heard you. You'd be signing up to watch me, Grace." I took her face in my hands, both of them, and her skin was wet, and she was still trembling, and she'd never looked more beautiful to me in my life. Not even in the red dress. Not even across that engagement party 20 years of feeling ago. 10 years ago, you decided you knew what I could handle, and you got it wrong, and it cost us 10 years. So here's me, finally getting to make the choice you took. I want the bad ones. Do you understand me? I want the tremor and the bad days, and the part where I hold you up on the dance floor because you can't stand on your own. And someday the part where you can't dance at all, and we just sit, and I hold your hand. I want all of it, because all of it is you. And I have spent 10 years locked out of a room I didn't even understand I was standing outside of. I loved you when you could dance better than me. I love you now, that you can't. It was never about the dancing. Grace, the dancing was just how I found you. She broke, completely. And I held her up because her legs weren't going to do it, and we stood there in the middle of the floor while people pretended not to watch. Two people who'd lost 10 years finding out the losing had been for nothing. The worst kind of nothing. The loving kind. We didn't fix it all that night. I want to be honest about that. Because the version where one dance heals 10 years is a lie, and this story has enough real in it that I don't want to cheapen it. We had a lot to work through. I was angry, genuinely angry, for weeks, under the joy that she'd stolen a decade from us out of a love so protective it curdled into a theft. She had to sit in that and let me be angry and not defend it. Because there was no defending it, only understanding it. And she had her own fear to work through, the deep, dug-in belief that she was a burden, that choosing her meant choosing suffering, that a good man would eventually resent the woman who slowly became his patient. That belief didn't dissolve because I made a speech on a dance floor. It took time. It's still, some days, taking time. But we did the work, because we'd both finally learned what it costs not to. She lived 3 hours away. Within a year, she didn't. She moved up to the valley, to a house not far from mine, and we did it slow and real, dating like new people even though we were the furthest thing from new. Because you don't just pick a 10-year-old life back up off the floor. You build a new one carefully with what you've got. I learned her disease, learned it properly, the way she'd once learned everyone else's bodies for a living. Learned the good days and the bad ones. The mornings her hands wouldn't cooperate with the coffee. The way cold made the tremor worse. The exercises that kept her mobile. The specialists. The whole geography of it. It didn't scare me the way she'd spent 10 years assuming it would. It was just part of the landscape of loving her, and the landscape of loving somebody always has hard country in it somewhere. She'd been so afraid of the hard country that she'd refused the whole map. Here's the thing nobody warned me about, the thing that turned out to be truer than any fear. The dancing didn't stop. It changed, but it didn't stop. On her good days, we still put on something slow in my kitchen, our kitchen now, and I put my hand flat on her back, and she puts her forehead against my jaw, and we turn in slow, small circles on the linoleum. And yes, she's shakier than she was at 29. And yes, sometimes I'm holding more of her weight than I'm not. And on the bad days, we don't so much dance as sway in place while she leans on me and lets the tremor do what it's going to do. But it's still the truest language we have. It's still two people becoming one thing. It turns out that was never really about how well your body works. It was about who you're willing to hold up and who you'll let hold you. We got married 11 months after that wedding, in my cousin's same barn actually, which Marcus found either romantic or absurd, and I told him could be both. Grace walked down the aisle on her own 2 feet a good day. We'd hoped and half planned for a good day, and we got one, and there was a tremor in the hand she gave me, and I held it, and it didn't scare me at all. At the reception, when the floor opened up, I took my wife out onto it and put my hand flat on her back, and we danced like we used to, which is to say we danced like we do now, which is slower and closer and holding on tighter, and I would not trade it for every effortless spin of 20 years ago. She still has bad days. She'll have worse ones coming, we both know it, we don't pretend otherwise, we just don't let the future rob the present the way it robbed our past. Some nights the tremor is bad and she gets quiet and I see the old fear surface in her eyes. The "you didn't sign up for this, you should have run," and on those nights I don't argue with her. I just stand up, and I hold out my hand the way I did across a crowded room half a lifetime ago, and I say, "Dance with me like we used to." And she takes it, and she does. And every single time, it says the thing I could never quite fit into words that I understood, finally, why she left, and that I'd have given anything for her to have trusted me enough to stay, and that we're not wasting one more day of whatever we've got choosing fear over each other. 10 years I believed a woman left me because I wasn't enough. It took one dance to feel the truth in my own 2 hands. She left because she loved me more than she trusted me to love her back through the hard part. She was wrong to leave. I've told her so, and she agrees. But I've stopped being angry about it, because the anger was just grief wearing a hard coat, and there's no room for either one anymore. There's just the kitchen, and the slow music, and my hand on her back, and a woman I almost lost twice teaching me the last thing I ever expected a dance to teach me, that the steps were never the point. Holding on was always the point, and I'm not letting go again.